All right, welcome back, Ben. Vivat Grendel, Ben.
Vivat Grendel, Eli. It's our 13th episode. Can you believe it?
It's crazy. Lucky 13. It's a big one, too, man. We got a great book, Batman and Grendel. We have, what can I say? You lined us up a special guest.
Yeah, I pulled all the strings that I possibly could. The ghost of Stan Lee will be joining us. Hit me with that intro.
Let's do it.
With the box ready to go fast, maybe slow. Yeah. Vivat Grendel.
It's like the devil is my best friend. Hunter rose with the pen to the fork end, or till time end. Like Orion, Jupiter my kin, bloodline private. We control the whole shit. The wolf won't beef, then we feast off the rip. Behold the devil in detail. Behold the devil in detail.
All right, we're back. What an intro, what a day, and we've got our super special guest,
Tony McMillen.
Tony McMillen, T-Max. Here he is, ladies and germs. Mr.
Hey,
Lumen himself, the serious creature, Tony McMillen.
The Southern Dandy!
Welcome, dude. Thanks for being here.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Now, go ahead, Ben. Oh.
As a guest, you're in great company. You're our first guest who isn't the creator of the book. So
Yeah, as I say, it's a step up, I think, having me on, but it's cool you had Wagner, through my bone. When you guys announced that, I was like flabbergasted. I was like, shit, episode 1, he's just there. It's amazing. Like,
we wanted to start high, so that way we could only either do better or just
like have Grendel on, like Hunter Rose back from the dead. Like,
it'd be amazing.
Like Wagner got it all wrong. I'm a really nice guy.
Speaking of which, you turned me on to that Penguin book cover generator, and so I made the My Little Chickadee cover, which Matt seemed to love.
It was a thing of beauty. When you showed me that, I was really, really honored to have a small part of that. Yeah,
that was cool.
Tony, you're a guy of lots of talents.
Thank you.
You're a musician, a songwriter, filmmaker, presumably, novelist, graphic novelist, colorist, letterer, all that stuff. An incredible amount of creative energy and productivity. You seem to just churn out work by the day with like this kind of punk rock, seat of your pants energy, and we love it. And we're happy to have you here.
That's really nice.
Yeah,
Thanks, man. Thanks a lot.
Did you want to come specifically for the Batman and Grendel book, or was this just what so happened to be when Ben asked you, or?
I think sort of, yeah, because basically I've read not all of the Grendel library, but a lot of it, and I always kind of remember the first thing I read was Black, Red, and White, and I really liked it, but I was kind of like I was like, it's cool, but I wanted like one big story, and I got this is like what really hooked me, because like there's a familiarity to Batman, obviously, and it had Grendel, and then I kind of went back and started reading all the big ones, and so I always kind of think of this in a weird way as like my entry point into Grendel, even though the first time I heard of Grendel was the War Child. I saw that the cover that Bisley did, and as a kid I was like, is there like a Predator who's also Venom now? Like, that's cool. Like, what is that? And like, I didn't really connect it.
Yeah.
Like what you're saying is probably pretty familiar to most people of a certain age who come up on mainstream stuff. I have like Wednesday buddies who only know Grendel from this book, and this would be the one piece of exposure that they'd have, and it's almost like, what a better place to start. As for me, I'd never read this one, so reading this issue this week was my first stab at it. Of course, you know me, I love to look at the pictures, but actually this one's super dense, so just like actually diving into it was a real trip.
So that means you have not read the sequel then, with Grendel Prime.
I've read the pictures.
Cool. Okay. Cool.
I read all the pictures. No, I haven't read the sequel yet.
Cool.
And I read War Child, and I read most of Past Prime. And one thing that I think we've mentioned on the podcast before is that like generally crossovers are just like very blatant cash grabs, you know, and we've cited the X-Men Star Trek one as just like finished it and I was like, oh, what the hell is this?
And that is to say the Star Trek TOS, not the much better
that's
X-Men
right. Yeah, of
Star Trek
course.
TNG,
Of course.
which
But
led into a novel series featuring the Thunderbolts.
I've seen the paperback novels at a coffee shop once, and I was like, "Holy shit! I need $3. Like this is great." Go on.
I do have one. I have one.
But when Matt does these crossovers, and he's done another one with the Shadow, it's canon. You know, it's a much smaller. I mean, there's so much Grendel stuff. Like, there's thousands of pages, it seems like, and yet, like, because he's sort of at the helm of all of it, he can get this license approved and make it a part of, you know, the mysterious Hunter Rose legend. Which, as much work as there is still there's still all these pockets of possibility and narrative, and it seems to fit in really well.
Yeah, and I think there was definitely some things in this book that shined a little more light on some different things, like because we're really scrutinizing the character. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, there is no Stacy in this. Many mentions of Larry, but maybe a good night to my girl or something like that. There's like brief talk, but another thing about the crossover too is there's no like, I'm calling a time warp or a dimensional vortex, and now I'm in like, it's just like Hunter's like, I'm bored in New York, let's go to Gotham. And
I also go ahead. What I really like too is also with Spawn and Batman. He decided to have Grendel. Hunter breaks his arm, and then in an earlier Grendel comic, he has a broken arm. It's because of this incident. And then in the sequel, the hole in the skull of Hunter Rose is because of an incident here. And in Spawn Batman throws a batarang in Spawn's face, and the next issue of Spawn, he just has like the stitches there. And I was like, that's kind of cool. These guys said, no, it's continuity. Like, just don't worry about it, fanboy. Like, yeah, Gotham and New York, they're all in the same world. I thought that was really fun.
Spawn Grendel crossover next.
Oh,
it's possible. I mean, it's possible.
Yeah, why not? That was so much fun. But
oh my god!
Real quick, you mentioned the Shadow crossover too, which is really fun. Wagner's creation, especially Hunter Rose, he fits into the Batman world like flawlessly. He could be part of the Rogues Gallery so easily, and he actually kind of fills a cool void that he doesn't exactly have of an adversary. So reading it, I was like, oh, this reading it again, I was like, this is so good. Like, if he would appear on the animated series, it would have been a great episode. It would have made total sense.
So great.
Yeah, he's almost a better Batman villain than most Batman villains are.
Oh,
in a way.
Well, and we see in a way at the end too, where each one kind of like is able to best them from their kind of each little corner of what they're better at. Like at the end of this first issue, there's some really interesting storytelling elements that go on in this. One kind of thing that we've been noticing is like it's all told from kind of the perspective of like journal entries. It's while every panel is like, you know, from someone's perspective, and then their thought bubbles, and each person is color coded. That is like part of my notes. Like Hunter's got the white handwriting. Bruce has like these computer log kind of things that are his Bruce Batman inner monologue. And then the two female protagonists that we meet have a different color and a different way of speaking and everything. And I think that's really well done.
And I feel like it's funny in novels when they're apostolatory, when they're most like Dracula's written in journal entries. A lot of times in novels that gets kind of it kind of slows me down and kind of bogs me up. But with the visualization of a comic book, I kind of love that storytelling because it's clearly color coded. You can go, oh, this is Hunter talking. It's really fun because then you can go back and forth. It's like what Frank Miller did Batman Year One. You have Gordon's thing, you have Bruce's thing. It moved the story along, and I love seeing the contradictions. And of course, somebody goes like, "Oh, I got the upper hand here," and you go, "No, the other guy is right." It's really fun. I love that.
And there's with 4 points of view, it sort of reminds me of the Cloud Atlas movie, where it just like jumps across 7 different POVs, and you gotta keep up. Before we get too deep into the structure and storytelling systems, I wanted to just make mention about like putting your mindset as like a 12 to 17-year-old in 1993 or whatever, you know, and you're definitely a Batman reader and you're familiar with it, and just like how Wagner is able to get you everything that you need to know about Grendel right away, hopefully to pique your curiosity to pick up like the one other Hunter Rose story that exists at this point, because this is the only, with the exception of Devil by the Deed chronologically, this is the only other Hunter Rose story that exists, which is just wild.
Yeah,
at this time. You can tell it's like the first time, and it feels good that he's kind of like spreading out a little more and kind of like taking his time to develop things. And I think to your point of developing Grendel for a Batman fan, I think he also quickly develops the two female protagonists, Hillie and Rachel, super fast too. So we're like immediately on board with both of them. We know Rachel's kind of put together. She works at the art gallery. Hilary is a literary editor who I keep feeling like is a Diana Schutz type.
Yeah, for sure.
But I see her in every book, I feel like. I don't know.
I love this visually, and also their lives they're characters from the movie Singles or Reality Bites. They're so 90s, young people trying to figure out their way in the world, and they're great. And also, it really drives home the Hunter Bruce parallels, and those two characters have parallels, and they are also sort of the opposite of one another in a lot of ways. So the four of them being the main voices is great. They keep binging off each other, and it plays really, really well.
Until their lives become like completely intertwined in
Right.
such an amazing way. One thing we were talking about earlier, if I can say, is the coloring in this, and it's probably maybe one of the only times where it wasn't recolored in the new omnibus, or it wasn't changed or whatever. We were talking earlier, we had a chat, and I said I'll just reach out to Matt to find out more about. So he wrote me a bunch. If you guys don't mind me reading it for the folks following along at home. So he said, all right, dude, here you go. Eli, Matt is so cool. All right, so the first Batman Grendel crossover, and before it, both Mage the Hero Discovered and the original incarnation Devil by the Deed were all colored by a now obsolete method known as blue line process, which you said, Ben. This method was state of the art at the time, but was somewhat quickly outdated by the advent of computer coloring, which we can see, but like, no matter how hard we try, I don't think we could ever fully accomplish this through a computer. There was a photographic company at the time, he's forgetting the name, that marketed the necessary chemicals for making a blue line print utilizing the negative acetate image. You treated the surface of any paper on which you liked to work. I was using pre-sketched watercolor paper mounted as a block by sponging on a layer of the chemical bath. Then you laid the negative image on top and exposed the surface to UV light. Originally on Mage. What? You can't believe you read this much?
That's crazy. No, I can't believe that you had to like develop the blue lines.
It's insane.
Yeah, the alchemy of doing this for every single page of
And isn't that what a mimeograph machine used to do? And how it would have the light, and you would get those like what we called runoffs when I was a kid, which would be these worksheets that would be in this like blue line. I wonder if it's the same thing. Mimeograph. Anyway, originally on Mage, I used an ordinary sun lamp that I'd mounted to the wall in my studio. But when Joe Matt, who colored this, but when Joe was coloring Batman Grendel, I was living in California, and he came out to stay with me for 2 months to color the art under my supervision. In that case, all we had to do was take the treated pad outside and set it up to the direct sunlight, and that gave us the same result. Thank you, California sun. So the California sun had an impact on Batman vs. Grendel. All right, so after the 5 minutes of exposure, you lifted off the negative, and presto, there was now a blueprint image of the original art on the paper. Since we were using a negative overlay, the blueprint was a positive image of the art in blue. So then the artist simply painted in the open non-blue areas with the desired colors, and then laid the positive image acetate over top. Again, presto, you had a finished colored page. The publisher would then scan the colored blueprint page and register it up with the positive scan, giving you the final ready-to-print files. Seems like a lot of work, but again, it seemed revolutionary to us at the time, and the results speak for themselves. People still love those original colored versions of these titles. Matt. Sick. What a process, dude.
Yeah, that sounds crazy. That they were scanning it with a flatbed or photographing it or
I don't know. I
that's
mean,
crazy.
yeah.
You know, I'm still a little confused about how certain things were done because it looks like, well, you know, you can sort of very clearly see the airbrush, and you know, colored pencil and other like medium effects.
Mhm.
There's also like what looks like, you know, regular flat Doc Martin dye coloring in there as well. So it must have just known if you're looking at this, it prints like four color. I don't know. It's still a little mystifying to me, but it's super cool.
I would love to know like how short-lived this sort of invention was. Like it was only a couple of years where this is it, and then computer coloring comes right in and takes it away. Like was there? Like he says there's like a small window of time.
Right.
I love like in film too when there's like this. You know, a couple of years we were doing this thing, we loved it, but you know, then it
It's
was
like
old
quickly,
hat.
yeah.
Yeah, and who knows if it had 5 more years, if it would have got even weirder or cooler. Yeah, that's
He
really
said he said explaining that to me felt like teaching someone how to churn butter. Because it's like so outdated and it's like this is useless information that no one can use.
that's awesome. Yeah.
It's funny because a lot of process stuff is, you know, there's like kind of two poles. There's like the traditional process people that need to work with like dipped pens and nibs, and then there's like people that like you know, the Tony McMillens of the world that like have like, yeah, you've got your crazy, you know, parallel line inking, and then you've got your Procreate coloring, but the Procreate's supposed to look like watercolor and crayon. Um, you know, when I teach, I have a 16-year-old that I'm teaching right now, and he's, you know, he's in that place where he's doing super sculpted pencil drawings, and he's like, I don't want to ink this. I'm like, well, you don't have to. You know, like scanners exist, and like maybe, you know, put a little bit on the contours and try to suss out where the solid blacks are. But like, you know, you don't need to ink everything in black, erase the pencils, and then photograph it. Like we have scanners. You know,
Yeah.
it can be whatever you want it to be, and I find that interesting.
Yeah, I think about that. There was a time where I was like sketching with mechanical pencil and then inking over that mechanical pencil and then erasing all that mechanical pencil. Oh, oops, I just ripped my page. It's like how that seems like the dark ages to me. And then like, you know, I figured out blue line and then still have yet to get on the Procreate, but
It's an amazing time to be a creator right now. There's so many options, and you can, of course, be intimidated by the snarl of possibilities, but it's still like, you know, like Tom Scioli, his stuff now, there is no ink, it's just pencil and then he colors it, and I love it. And I try to decipher how his technique is, then he just broke it down. I was like, oh, that's what you're doing? Oh, of course. And it
makes
looks
total
great.
sense now.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, why don't we get into the book, guys? Did we all use the classic DC Kamiko version, or looks like it?
The covers are exquisite. Like these covers, when I first saw them, I think I saw them in Wizard magazine, and it's just like, oh, the way the gradient kind of green, this looks so operatic and cool. I was really just blown away by these covers.
Oh man, yeah, they're amazing. And because this is Matt's first Batman work as well, you can see the growth of what his Batman becomes. It becomes a lot more chunky and brick, more squared edge when it comes to Monster Man or Mad Monk.
That's very true.
It's just cool to see the genesis, and it's just such a Matt story when you think about the what he chooses to focus on, the characters. He chooses these two women to also kind of intertwine in the story. He perhaps it could be like his wife and Diana, maybe even. I don't know. I don't know why. I always think every woman is Diana in his books. It's not.
I had seen him say somewhere that it was two friends, two female friends that he knew.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Seemingly indicating that not. You know, it's funny. I am interested in all the characters here except for Batman and Bruce Wayne. Like I could give a shit about him.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like we know everything about him. It's
Right.
like there's nothing left unless like some Scott Snyder's going to come along and generate a fake brother in an underground. but it's just like
well, that's why the Frank Miller Bruce Wayne and Batman is my favorite. It's probably the first one I really read a lot, but he gives him a lot of problems, and he's a really complicated, conflicting character. He's really messed up, and that makes him really interesting. And in this one, Hunter Rose kind of hints that they're not, the very like, cliche, we're not so different. It's true. The guys are both obsessed, and even at the end when Batman's trying to save the kid, but he's also really interested in beating Hunter's ass, and Hillie's kind of like, you're just almost as bad, really. Like, it's not really about saving anybody. You're just kind of trying to match wits with this guy. So, but yeah, of the four characters, Bruce probably suffers the most. I do like that, of course, Batman is in the way Wagner writes him, and is the way a lot of people write him. Batman's the real guy. Bruce Wayne's the mask, and Batman will refer to Wayne. Like, Wayne needs to do this, or it'd be cool if Wayne did this. Haven't shown him in public lately, so that's always kind of fun. I enjoy that.
I agree. Yeah. Whereas Hunter kind of exists dually in a way. He created his alter ego of Hunter Rose. Well, because Hunter Rose is already an alter ego of Eddie. Right. And then Hunter Rose's alter ego is Grendel. So it's
is it just that Eddie or Hunter he digs being Hunter? It's more fun than Bruce. Bruce doesn't seem like he gets much joy out of being Bruce. No, it's like, well,
I don't even think there is an Eddie at all. I think Jocasta Rose killed Eddie.
Well, Hunter was the gift that Jocasta gave him that lasted. Was the ability to be this person, who wasn't sad and lonely and mediocre and whatever it was.
Right. And that was couch potato parents and was locked in suburban hell.
Just basically like Tuxedo Mask who deals coke, like, which is a great way to be.
Yeah.
If I had the choice,
I'd kills child pornographers.
Yeah, do it.
Cool. So we open up on the cityscape of New York, and we just see Hunter saying, bored, I'm so bored. I know I own everything. I run everything. These people are so boring. And then we kind of have it starts immediately with the simultaneous storylines, and we see Batman as well.
Yeah, and you can sort of see this. The styles are much different. Batman is like just to the point. Hunter has like 3 times more to say.
Yeah.
Probably to get, all the 17-year-olds like up to speed on as much as they can. This is a time when this is a period where Argent is in hiding, apparently. I don't precisely recall when that was, but as soon as Argent is
after he falls through the thing, didn't he go through?
Okay.
So after he's embarrassed and he
yeah. Hunter sets him up and
in my mind, that's like the Ed 209 moment when he falls down the stairs and his legs are doing this.
Oh, yeah.
It's like really like, oh, sorry, dude.
Come on.
Yeah, it's that kind of embarrassment and awkwardness is like, that's not seen in like adventure superhero comics.
Right.
Like now it is. Now it feels like now that's all they do. It's just like, kind of put these characters through like tasks of humiliation. But at that point, it was just like,
well, so here Larry gives him the idea to go to Gotham, right?
Mm-hmm.
Larry's worth every penny I pay him. He tells me of a special deal going down in Gotham City, and immediately just introducing Gotham City as it's just another city.
Mm-hmm.
It's just another place, even though it kind of serves as New York City, but
it's another New York.
Yeah, I respect that. There's not like too much into that, like. It's just another city. Boom. Gotham.
Yeah, because if you dig too much, then it just kind of crumbles, and exactly. I don't care. Yeah.
There's a ton of architecture in this book, and there's all those things where like the gutters, large extended gutters overflowing with buildings and stuff like that.
There's some really cool 8 panel pages where there's a big panel and a small panel that makes up like a square in the middle of the page, and it's each person's kind of reflection at that moment. And that happens a few times in this book. And I think someone could be like, oh, how do you necessarily read this? But it's like each moment can be read in any order, and it kind of just establishes like what's going on with each person in this moment.
I think Wagner's always been good at that, like a little bit of a choose your own adventure on a page, because it's not going to change it too much, but you can kind of have your fun with it. It's a mosaic in a way. I always respected that, and especially knowing that this came, especially his early Grendel work, that was before a lot of people were doing that. It was always like, oh, this is really like innovative stuff.
Yeah. I wonder how much of his success with the Demon led to DC being like, what do you want to do next? And was he like Batman Grendel or something, you know?
What I think that the opportunity to do this book came earlier, might have because it gestated for a little while, and the initial idea was to do another female Grendel, and then Diana was like, well, like, don't you see the parallels between the two? And he's like, oh yeah, why reinvent? Why this time I won't reinvent the wheel? You know, this is the one-time work.
Well, the parallels start immediately here because Hunter shows up at this like hoity-toity rich guys club, you know, which is a place obviously that Bruce Wayne, the Mask, would come in and be well known, and so it just so happens that they're sitting next to each other, and they're just
we've been at one of these clubs before. Larry was at one of these.
That's right,
society clubs with
in the Bernie Moreau story, right?
Yeah.
And they're just like, your shit smells as delicious as mine, and they're like, you're absolutely correct. What is that? Strawberries? And they're like, it is. And they're like, I'm Bruce Wayne. I'm Hunter Rhodes.
I can't, there's like a bohemian, cosmopolitan hint of bisexuality that Hunter's written with a few times here. And when he drinks Wayne's drink and then gives it to him, I was just like, oh, this is like this guy, like the word lush isn't quite right, but it's like the world is whatever he wants to make of it. And he just gets away with doing anything.
Well, I think it was really fresh for like a lot of mainstream writers to play with. Is Batman repressed, or even Bruce, like Frank Miller's like Joker is definitely on some level. It doesn't have to be sexual, but he's in love with Batman literally. And then Grant Morrison played with that Arkham Asylum, where is Batman like are these all sexual like frustrations he has, and so Hunter is super liberated. Hunter, I could see if you wrote him now, he's pansexual, or he's. I would think so too. Yeah, he's almost like Hannibal Lecter in the last Hannibal show. Like it's beyond sex for him. It's like everything he does, the violence. That's his total gratification. So
yeah, and that might be, a weird form of having processed, trauma of being 14 and having all this like sexual experience,
right?
Which we also get into here.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Matt's carpeting is to die for.
Yeah,
good segue.
Yeah, it's really good.
That's why I know I'm almost 40. I actually look at like the decor in the room, like that looks beautiful. Like if I could have that, oh my god. And at
just
age
beautiful
like,
decor.
Yeah, when I first read it, it was like 17 or 20 or something. I was like, oh my god, like look at the muscles. This is badass.
Where's the fight?
Yeah, exactly.
So we move on after the meeting, and we start getting introduced to the worlds of Rachel King and Hillie Farrington. Hillie is short for
Hillary.
Hillary, yes.
Yeah.
And Rachel King, or Ray, as Hillie calls her, her words are in yellow, and they seem to be ripped in many places, sometimes not even completely finishing, as if to show how busy she is, how on the move she is, how constantly thinking she is. Rachel...
I think a bunch of characters occasionally will get that, but it seems like Rachel has that the most.
Yeah.
And maybe Batman has it the least.
Oh, yeah. Because he's so... he's speaking to be with the most information and the least amount of words for his like files or whatever.
Right. And then Hillies are all at Dutch angles.
Oh yeah, because she's kind of like scatterbrained and all over the place, and like one of those scatter geniuses. Now Rachel runs an art gallery, the Leonard Ross Gallery. Mr. Ross will come into later. He'll be one of Grendel's classic black males. And Hillie Farrington is a literary editor, and they're trying to secure Hunter's next book for publish to be edited by her company. And good.
Yeah, man. I love that.
I took notes this time.
I love that the publisher's name is printed backwards on the window.
Smart, yeah.
And I was like, because I think that they mention it in like, oh, Larry is, in the Larry sending me to New York and all that, and blah blah blah.
I love, like, of course, Hunter is a novelist, but I love anytime there are fake books within a world, and there's like fake publishing companies, and I think Wes Anderson did that a lot in a lot of his early films, and I love that everyone's written a book, and at the end of this, of course, is Hillie go on to write a book? I believe at the end, is that.
I only read the first issue this time.
Oh,
so it's been a
you're the
minute.
only one
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
right. I haven't even read it.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I think at the very end she writes some sort of tell-all book about her story, because
Which I think is good. Yeah.
She's a writer herself, and she asks Hunter for tips, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And you've written books that are
Yeah.
like that, where there are books within books. Your book Nefarious Twit is about that.
Yeah, it's about fake kids, children's book author. I just love that kind of stacking of reality, and it's like the Simpsons writers when they take 10 hours to think of one joke that's going to be in a billboard. You can waste so much time thinking of like the perfect name for a book, which isn't real. It's always fun.
Yeah, I love that stuff.
We'll get into this more later, but Rachel's like, I have a hard time conceiving the level of power that Rachel wields as a professional, because the dynamic, I mean, she and Leonard Ross, she must be really good at her job to not get shit canned like every panel that she interacts with Leonard Ross.
Yeah, for sure.
Or it's a little bit, he's also so inept that he needs someone to actually knows what they're doing, because I get the vibe too, like if she left, he would just be screwed.
Right. And it's still, it's still the 80s where the power dynamic, where men weren't really able to allow a woman to really like do everything she could do because of these power dynamics and the structure of 1980s, whatever. But Rachel's like, I know way more about this than you. Like you said, I could do it without you, but you couldn't do it without me.
Right.
I need those clothes, kitty.
Then we cut back to the Wayne Tech board.
Yeah.
Private club meeting. This is where the meat of the plot comes in. Matt had said in that ash can that it was like the Bill Finger bigness of the giant playing cards and robots and pennies and stuff like that. That's how the Sphinx kind of played into it. Mm-hmm. I'm a little confused. Like, it seems to me like that the reason that they want to ship the Sphinx's head to Gotham for restoration is really like a PR. I don't know. It's not really clear to me why that's something that they need to do, and why there's so much secrecy that comes about it. Maybe you guys can help me out with that.
It seems like a Batman 66 type of idea or something like that. It's like this MacGuffin kind of thing.
I mean, it is a MacGuffin, and so it's smart to have something that grand and big. But honestly, I really couldn't parse together like what is happening. It didn't really matter too much. Obviously, it's just there to move the plot. But
it also has to be something that's big enough and like expensive and important enough to make someone like go to these lengths for like Hunter Rose to want to steal it.
I love that it's a visage, it's a face, and of course Grendel gets to put his own mark on it. It's basically like this close to like putting Chairface on the moon from the Tick. It's it's real. It's a big statement. It's a grand gesture.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It just seems like the risk. Like, what is the reward for like the risk of shipping this thing?
Yeah, right.
But it doesn't really. It doesn't. That's not what it's about. So anyway, they need to. They just need to shroud it in secrecy, so none of the lunatics that run around Gotham City will fuck this shit up.
Right. The Rogues Gallery and everyone, for sure. And
it's
again,
the worst
here's
city to do this to.
Yeah, exactly.
To get the acid rain, off of it.
Right.
Another great carpet here.
Yeah, this is Tony. This is what you were talking about, like Batman talking about Wayne as a puppet to like look disinterested or boorish or just keeping up appearances.
Yeah, I think that Wayne is like a little more in depth than matches Malone to Bruce, really, but it's not much. It's so thin.
Yeah,
like Bruce Wayne doesn't have a favorite song. It's like it's pretty much that.
Yeah,
right.
But Batman does, and it's Bat Dance by Prince.
Fuck yeah, it is.
All
That
the
exists.
while, Hunter is on the ledge, still with his wine,
Mm.
just listening on in.
Oh, I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, it's kind of well, he's hidden from from you.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a few panels where on the next page he's like in the shadows.
But yeah, he's even like outside. He's like super dubious.
I love like him drinking on a ledge. It's so self-destructive and badass, but it's, juvenile. It's
Yeah.
great. I mean, because he's one. He's like, is he 24 yet, or does he die?
I don't.
If
Yeah,
that,
it's yeah.
he might be 22 in this story.
Mm-hmm.
He's never 25. He's dead
Right.
before
Yeah.
then. And then also, how old is
Bruce?
Bruce Wayne supposed to be?
Bruce.
Yeah,
I would
I
guess
think-
around the same.
I would say tops in this story, like mid 28, really tops, but probably not. Yeah.
Because I would say there's a time where Bruce gives up, or Batman, or whoever gives up the whole visage, the whole millionaire playboy attempts. Like he's just kind of like he's like done. He's like, I'm not on the board anymore. I don't need to bother with any of this.
Right.
He gives it up. I would say in his 30s probably.
I would
Hires Morgan
posit that
Freeman
this
runs the
story
company.
might take place after the other Matt Wagner Batman stories because they're so early.
Oh yeah, because
so early in his career.
Oh,
I don't
that's
know.
possible.
Maybe not. Maybe not.
So then we get to see a little bit of Hillie and Rachel at work, trying to give like a little bit of where they come in and how they're gonna loop in with Bruce and with Hunter Rose. We see, he's saying there's going to be the show. We have all this great stuff. I don't know. I guess that doesn't really tie it in yet. But we see with Hillie, he's telling her like Hunter Rose is in town. We're going to set up a meeting. You're the best editor. So if not a little, messy.
Right. I mean, seems like she's a little bit of a rock star in her own world, and she works in an environment where that's okay as long as you get the deal signed and the book comes out. It's okay. You can party. You can do what you want.
Right.
Yeah, it's definitely got that like, oh, for sure, can do Diana vibe.
See, okay, yeah,
about it. Yeah, no, I definitely felt that way too. The cartooning on Rachel in this whole book is wonderful. It's like really stripped down. Like there's parts that are super iconic. There are parts that are like just like loose and simple and doodly, and they're so far removed from like hot 90s pinup vapidness that really turns me on about this
almost
book.
like Sunday strippy in a way.
Yeah.
You love those Sunday strips.
He actually, he allows his women when they're angry or upset, they look angry and upset. They're not just there to be like sexy or beautiful or pouty. Like she's like, you didn't clean the dishes or whatever. And it's like, she's a little mean, and that's how a person would look.
Yeah,
but
and
also
it's a super realistic female relationship between the two of them. I would say, having lived with women for a while.
The only time I thought he slipped a little bit into like a pillow fight situation was the footsie on the couch was like, I'm like, oh yeah, that feels really real. And then I think Hillie spills something on her shirt and she has to wash up. And it's not like you get like a full frontal shot. I'm like, is there a point to that? Like, it's,
right.
That's the only time.
Some side boob.
Yeah.
Matt's gotten away with that more than once at DC, and I think a lot of it has to do with like that it's not like an exploitative style.
Right.
True. Yeah, it's just real.
I mean, there is sexy nudity in faces, but here it's like the pillow fight scene,
right,
or whatever. I like here when we go back to Grendel on the rooftop, listening in, that he sort of explains the corporate crime plotting to the 17-year-olds.
Right.
That it reminded me of did you guys see Succession on HBO?
Unaware of it. I haven't watched it. No.
Oh, it's great. It's so good.
Oh, spoilers.
Hit me.
It's great. It's great. It's like cousin Greg that they kind of can find a patsy, or whatever.
But then he kind of, but I won't say it, spoilers.
I was really fascinated by Joe Matt's work on the figures inside of the building here, where it looks like they're, I don't even know, like marker over airbrush. or
Yeah, for
something.
sure.
They're sort of like transparent.
Like,
And,
wonder what Matt's pencils look like there too. If it's just like a basic outline.
they might have not. Yeah, just like a little note. But we'll be able to ask Joe Matt hopefully next week because he's agreed to be on the podcast.
Oh, that's
What?
awesome.
You heard
Oh
it
my
here.
god, that's awesome, dude. Hell
That
yeah,
should be pretty cool.
dude. Sick. Good job, dude.
Yeah, well,
Hey,
you don't ask, you don't
yeah.
get. The people's thoughts getting cut off here
Mhm.
is super cool.
And it's so smart because it gives us it just gives us what we need. You know, it doesn't,
Yeah.
it doesn't beat around the bush or anything.
There's no fat, and like I said, the pages are already dense enough, and there's enough panels, enough captions that I don't need too much else. I also love the staircase on page 7, winding down. There's not a lot of extra detail, but it just looks great. The marble kind of column, which is part of it, I just think that looks really simple and great, and it really has a real flow to it.
The only person that's allowed excess exposition is Hunter Rose in this. Everyone else is like to the point, except for Hunter Rose, who's super verbose.
Right.
This is also the most that we've speaking of verbose, like the most that we've seen from his logs directly. I think last episode it was the one that was like super poetic about like the flinty spark of history, and like it was really like literary and purple, and we were like, oh, maybe that's what his logs look like. It's like, nah, like that's him being fancy. His logs are,
that could have been an excerpt from a book or something. Even
you know what I really liked is that, and I don't want to go back. Tony's pushing us forward, I'm pushing us back. Is that on the very first page he talks about how his novel has been long delayed, and then he chastises himself for it. He says, shut up. And it's like, oh, like writing these books is actually work for him.
Yeah.
Right. I think we read that My Little Chickadee he wrote in a weekend, but that doesn't mean that it was easy.
Right.
It was a strained weekend from hell.
So
cool. And then we kind of see the ladies a little bit leaving their work. Again, Rachel is battling with this overzealous male who's like, warning you, Miss King. Warning me? Like, I run this place. You don't know shit. And then while on the other hand, it seems like Hillie has a fairly decent relationship because she's like maybe didn't allow any shit from the beginning or something, and has constantly, though an old art dealer is definitely different from like an editing, like a book person, maybe.
it's a less high stakes position.
Yeah.
And there's, not to put Hillie down, but it's like she knows that she's in this position to wrangle Hunter because she knows how to dress,
Yeah.
You
and does good work.
She says it herself. Yeah, well, she's gonna be his star. I thought that was funny. It's like, well, if you're such hot shit, maybe you'll be at a bigger publisher. I don't know.
Now they know she owns a suit that has like forks and knives as part of like the and that's all you need basically. That sweet like Adam Ant like forks and knives thing. You're gonna be the star.
She has some great outfits in this for sure. Hillie does.
I was making fun of them. One of them, my wife Taylor was like, "That looks awesome." I was like, "Oh shit, I guess I was." I don't know.
And then next page, we see that they live together. This hadn't been previously. We didn't know that they had any relation at all. But now we see that these two women live together. And she is like,
what an apartment.
Oh, yeah, it's amazing.
This is like, it's like a sitcom, it's like Friends.
It's like Friends.
Yeah.
That big round window and stuff. And they're just kind of going over their life. This is what I was talking about that I felt like is a super realistic French relationship. They're drinking, they're talking about their problems, they're getting dressed together, they're showering, they're doing their life here together.
I think it's also that classic young people thing where someone's like, "Hey, let's go out and do this and that," and the other person's like, "Yeah, I gotta work tomorrow. I don't know what you're doing, but sorry." And that's
it's like, come on,
right? And when you're younger, that's kind of a big, possible divide. Right? We never hang out anymore. It's like actually we hang out every week. We do something, but we don't hang out every night.
Yeah. You mean we don't go to the clubs and get trashed anymore?
Right.
Dang.
I also think that there's the panel near the bottom, right before the big background of the cityscape, where Hillie's jumping. I mean, it's just her kind of leaping off the panel. There's a lot of energy there. It reminds me of this Frank Miller panel from Dark Knight Returns, where one of the mutant gang they're leaving the police station, and he has like a police hat on. He's just leaping like that,
Mm.
and I swear like I seen like Liefeld and like Larson rip it off too. And this could just be a coincidence, but that's the first thing I thought. I was like, oh shit, is that like a little bit of a Miller thing? I don't even know if Wagner like follows Miller. I don't know if he digs him at all.
I don't know about it either. I would guess, but
Yeah, I figured he came around.
seem like they're contemporaries. And
right.
And then here on the next page is the first of the type of pages that I was talking about, where it's 4 panels, each of the person, and then a little kind of like a memory. These memories are used over and again, and it's kind of like here's the memory that shaped their vision of like the future here that is affecting them presently almost.
And I thought these might be duo shade just because you can see the diagonal striation, but I'm not. It's sort of hard to see. It might be such a low gauge. Looks like there's something.
It does look like it though. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love how simply they're drawn. It's really beautiful and it feels like a memory. It's not a lot of detail really, but it's enough to kind of conjure the ghost of what happened.
Or not fully formed even too. And it's just like there are these little things, it's like someday, Bruce, after we're gone, this will all be yours, or and it's his dad, and then it's her mom, and it looks like it just shows what makes these people kind of a little bit view into who they are. And then we have Joe Costa for Hunter, and
which is of course really tragic and interesting that his parental figure is also his lover, and it obviously that shaped his worldview. But
absolutely.
I love it. Also,
she did a good job in her way,
If
she found success doing something.
Yeah,
I mean,
she created one of the biggest
religions,
demons.
and
yeah, that's true. Yeah. She's Mother Mary, or the.
I really love that the scale of detail is able to kind of par down with these really tiny figures, and that's how on the previous page, for example, like you're just able to have like straight up nudity because there's no detail. Like they're nude and you can see those shapes and forms, but it's like it's all very simple lines, like get in, get out. It's not.
And it's not overly sexual.
Right.
It's
not
sexual
like
at all.
when Jim Lee draws all the laces in the bra or whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly. So again, we're kind of seeing what's happening in each person's life. Rachel's chilling on the bed. She's kind of making plans for tomorrow. Alfred has, and I like this, just the vision that Alfred is like laying out Bruce's like uniform, his outfits for the next day. He comes home and and it also shows that this is early perhaps in Batman's life where his uniform is just say spandex. It's not armor. It's not.
They call it tights. Like Alfred's like, your tights will be ready, sir. And
yeah.
Doesn't like offended. He's like, yeah, dude.
Sweet, thanks.
Yeah, and I feel like when Matt draws the suit, you can often see kind of the long john cuffs and stuff like that. That's I really enjoy that. Yep. So then Hunter gets a package from Larry at the Gotham Arms Hotel, and
which has been a great place for him to stay. They give him utter privacy.
Yeah. He's like Royal Tenenbaum,
Oh yeah, he's in there. Yeah.
I figured Gotham is so corrupt and crooked. I mean, like every abandoned clown factory has somebody hiding in there. Like no one bats an eye. You just give some money. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You do what you want.
The docks as well, the New York docks and the Gotham docks. We constantly are like, so much happens at the docks. Like, does anything good happen at the docks? Like, I don't know.
Shoreman. Yeah.
It's just a wretched hive of scum and villainy down there. And then we see Hillie going down to CBGB's and meeting up with her friends to kind of go. Actually, I guess it's called the Hubbub Club or something.
Hubbub Club.
Club Hubbub.
Yeah. It took her an hour on the bus to get there.
Yeah, but it was worth it for her.
What do you have any insights in Rachel calling for not a gigolo, but for like a bodyguard?
I guess, man.
I was not sure.
I thought it was an escort, but she doesn't want it for sexual purposes. Just simply to be so. She's very much like Bruce in that I'm just there for a mission. Her mission's her job, but she's not really there. I thought that was really interesting. Like she's like basically needs a beard, but just so no one hits on her and everyone thinks she's normal.
Yeah.
and that's crazy. Like you're like a young, fairly beautiful woman or whatever. You could probably don't you have somebody you can take, platonically? But I guess not. Yeah.
Yeah.
She probably doesn't have a lot of friends besides Hillie. It seems like she probably
It's only work, and she only
Yeah.
knows Hillie because they were friends in school or whatever.
Right, yeah.
They've known each other.
Yeah, well, she's high powered and she's also traumatized.
True.
So
They both
that
are
stuff
kind
isn't,
of.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Next page, man, really cool
Cool.
development work that Hunter's doing, figuring out this world of Gotham City. We see Matt's first foray into drawing the Rogues Gallery, which is just awesome. He's kind of like getting info from Larry. Hunter's getting info from Larry about these loons, these people who he can possibly use, and that's just so amazing too. That Hunter's like, these are all simps, all these amazing villains that we've come to know, and he's just like, I'll just use them as pawns in my own game.
What kills me though, he's so dismissive about like pretending to be Catwoman. I was like, dude, you got the form for it. You can fill that suit out amazingly.
Yeah,
You're like a lithe, like Peter Parker-esque like figure. Like,
he definitely
awesome.
he has the figure that he could pull off. I think it's really cool. I'm always a big Riddler fan, so I think it's cool that he chooses to use Riddler, and I think it makes the most sense, obviously, in that although it becomes funny that Hunter's like a better writer than Edward Nygma,
and that's how like Bruce is like,
this is not from.
Yeah, this guy is incredible.
Yeah,
I actually love that. So this is Wagner's first Batman work published, right?
correct.
It feels like he's definitely like, well, I want to draw everybody real quick. Like I need a panel of the Joker, I need a panel of Two-Face, because it has the energy of like, this is my one shot. I'm doing at least a quick blast of everybody.
Yeah,
That's
got
fun.
to.
And also, there's a nice like subtle jab at the Penguin. Like, this Penguin sucks. I don't care.
Yeah, he speaks for himself. I'm afraid. It's
Yeah.
just like.
It's funny how the design of Two-Face will evolve from this project, from this one
Faces.
panel to the next
When
project.
did Faces come out? Did we figure that out?
I think it was like 95.
So what? It was for sure after this.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
And wasn't this delayed a little bit too? There's some sort of like
Yeah. Well, the
so-
Kamiko thing, and it's evident too in the end because it says like the Kamiko staff, and it says Andrew Rev, who took over Kamiko later.
So was this drawn like, say, was it the 90s yet even, or is it like 89 or something?
See, I don't have all the specifics on that, and it's like just messy, and I'm sure it's like was a shitty time for Matt, so I don't even really bother like trying to pry into it too much. But like,
Sounds like the initial deal was struck up
right,
during
and
the original run of the series.
yeah, and I think that much of the art was done, but then it had to be shelved until that's just what I feel like I've gotten out of what he's talked about, and that it just kind of was shelved for a little bit and then came back, and then maybe. Yeah.
So is this the first time that DC was willing to partner Batman with an independent character? Because there's no Ninja Turtle crossover 2 years later, and Spawn and Predator was, I think, a couple years after this, or maybe a year or two.
Yeah, I'm positive that this was the first time any mainstream character had hooked up with an independent / creator.
And that crossovers beyond like X-Men, Teen Titans, and those 6 stories. Like this is before that boom.
Right.
Before every Ultraverse character needed the Silver Surfer crossover or whatever the hell.
I mean, of course, there was like Batman, Superman, World's Finest, like inner office stuff.
But it's a big deal if one of the big two is like, hey, it's an independent book. Let's try it. Let's go for it. Yeah.
And
It says a lot about the sales of a book like this.
I think it says a lot too about Matt and how much they saw in Matt after his demon work. Perhaps they were like, we loved this, and Matt was actually telling me that it was kind of a shit show with the demon. Actually, that the first issue was inked 3 different times.
Oh wow!
Due to some issues with some different artists that someone mentioned it on Twitter, and I was like, and I was like,
Alfred.
He digs the cast. Yeah, he's always posting about the cast. And I was like, I'll reach out to Matt on this. And Matt was like, oh, God, it was like bullshit, man. It was 3 different times. He didn't give me much, and it seemed like another stressful thing. So I wasn't, again, going to pry.
Oh, another headache from DC.
I know. Hey, it must be like, it's just, I don't know. We don't need to get into all the DC, but.
Who's to say?
Yeah. So we'll continue on here. So he chooses the Riddler.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Tony says that Tony thinks that this takes place like after, if Argent's missing, it's after the fall, and I thought that Stacy missing her daddy was interesting because he's only been referred to as uncle or Hunter.
Right.
And I think this is like the word daddy is used in Diana's story, but I think that's the only other.
I think perhaps it could be like Larry. He doesn't like.
It is in quotation marks, right?
And you know, she doesn't like Larry at all. And maybe it's just one of those things that Larry does that pisses her off.
He's the one
she's not my
watching
daddy.
her.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure he is. Oh, I can't see her. She was probably lost in my cigarette smoke.
Yeah.
I always said Larry is like Gary Oldman, like circa 96 or so. Like this, there's something super extra skeevy about him, and like,
Oh, he's the worst.
yeah.
Oh man. So then he's like, I'm gonna write up a riddle, which I think, man, he's jumping really quickly into it without, you know, it's like trying to write in someone's style without ever having to read a book they wrote or something like that. And he just kind of jumps right in. He's like, oh, he writes riddles? I got this.
Hunter strikes me as a fairly confident kind of guy.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
But,
Cocksure, genetically mutated brain, but I'm leaning towards not supernaturally driven
right.
these days.
And I guess, I mean, you could say that the Riddler too has some sort of modified brain chemically, but I think maybe Hunter's was modified sharper, whereas Edward Nygma's was just like, woo!
Well, as we see here, Hunter is not, he makes mistakes.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And thank God for it, because we wouldn't have a story
Yeah.
otherwise.
So then we come here, we see Alfred, who's all beat up. And I wrote down, like, what's he all beat up from? Like, maybe Matt was using something from a previous Batman story, but we learned later what happened.
Yeah, it also, on page 2, the final Batman caption is accident in the cave today.
Right.
Okay.
I also gotta say a little attention to the bear rug is so well drawn. I love that fucking bear head.
Yeah.
And the stone floor. It's very like
Right.
the huge cobblestones on the floor. Yeah.
And
face above the fireplace.
I think Matt's trying to do things to especially show Hunter's side is like a little more futuristic, a little more how we always say his is kind of like Art Deco.
Art Deco, yeah.
And Bruce's world is a little more, I guess I don't even know, not necessarily
Old money.
Gothic, old money.
Yeah.
So he's really trying to push it because we have spreads of their worlds right here. And again, it's not Hunter's abode, his usual abode, but still. We get some.
I like this page that there's in Alfred. I've got shades of Kurtzman and of Toth at the same time, and they're just super simple. It's not, he's a cartoon character, and it works quite well.
And I love when you can draw a character with a mustache and no mouth, just draw a stash and then just blank. I always love that. Michel Fife does that with one of his characters from Cobra a lot. It always kind of works for me. Good
stuff. This is kind of like a Bruce kind of story page. It doesn't drive the story along too much. Am I right in that?
Yeah.
Kind of just talking
Well,
about.
he gets Alfred off the board.
Right.
I think he feels bad that the stalactite maintenance in the cave was no good.
Yeah.
And thankfully, Alfred was there to push him out of the way, but he got crushed by falling rocks.
It's smart story-wise because, like, initially when I was rereading it, I forgot how exactly it unrolled. But I was like, oh, does like Hunter go into the cave and not having Alfred there means that Alfred won't be in danger? It's like, no, Alfred's British and he'll like solve this little bit of British lingo that Bruce needs later on in the story. So that's the reason why he's like, pushed away for a while. Because I was like, you need Alfred in there. That's like the only comic relief.
Yeah, take a pawn off the table kind of thing.
Right.
All right, next page we see we kind of get into the traumas of these two women interspersed with their lives here kind of going on. Hillie's dancing. What band do you think is playing, or is it a DJ?
Oh, it's gonna be a band back then, I think.
Gotta be, yeah. That's why I said CBGB's. It's probably like a punk rock club, judging from.
I think it's like Bauhaus, but like a little ska.
Yeah, exactly. Ziggs will never learn another dance. Ziggs strikes me as like a ska type of name.
Yeah.
And we kind of see again that Hillie is kind of, she's living that bohemian lifestyle too. There's a girl who's paying attention to her, that's fine with her, but she's just here to dance. And we see Rachel, who's sleeping but having these nightmares, and then she's kind of having like a sexual dream, but then maybe it's reference to her traumas of youth. And
Yeah, it looks that way.
Yeah.
Both Hillie and Rachel's cuts from flashback or dream to reality are both graphic matched compositionally.
Yeah, totally.
But Hunter and Bruce's are sort of almost reversed. They're almost like a palindrome.
It's almost like the reaction to that situation or something.
Oh, I actually didn't notice that. That's great. Yeah.
And then also the contrast between Hunter and Jocasta in size is really like.
Yeah, we're always mentioning on the youthful or non-youthful drawing of Hunter, and that really shows.
Right. Exactly how young and innocent. Yeah.
He really
is. It's interesting. The Bruce Hunter is like Hunter's admiring his mask. Bruce is kind of like quickly putting that mask over. Like he doesn't want to be Bruce anymore. He wants the Batman mask.
Yeah. And again, showing Matt's utter genius when it comes to laying out a page, like unrivaled almost.
Yeah, but more on the Hunter Bruce like two sides of the coin thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like what Jocasta gave him is he's proud of what he's been able to turn. He's honored her memory with this mask.
Yeah.
They both kind of do that, but for different reasons.
Yeah. One out of honor and one out of fear, maybe. And then in the center, we see the first kind of personalization of Leonard Ross himself. So Leonard is getting in a cab and heading home. I guess we pick up with him from where he was earlier in the night. And then Hillie's heading home after a late night at the club where everyone else kind of met someone or went off with whoever else. Hillie is walking down a dark and lonesome alleyway in Gotham City, which just to me seems like common knowledge of any Gothamite would know.
There are street cops wearing tank tops. I mean, come on.
They're everywhere. And so Leonard's going home. He looks like Grendel put his wife to sleep, and he's ready to give Leonard a talking to.
I want to give a shout out to, I can't pronounce his name, Ken Brunizek, the letterer here.
Oh.
Just like the heavy lifting that he does on this book, I would, it's comparable to Todd Klein on Sandman. Just the 4 different fonts, the 4 different styles, but then also like I'm not sure. It seems like he's probably the person who's kind of making the decisions of like where to cut people's thoughts off. And then also there's like on these Hillie captions, she's interacting with the panels, with the captions, where she's overlapping or her hand and purse are kind of obscuring some stuff. So this is next level stuff. So Ken B, I believe was a Steranko apprentice maybe.
Wow.
And then I think his big deal is American Flag, which is the same in terms of lettering and design and logos is like
they're
this on steroids.
Right.
It's exciting for sure. We see this collage of action happening for everyone. The street toughs, Leonard coming home, Hillie noticing what's happening, starting to run. She loses her shoes. Her shoes are flying in the air. She is nervous. And just as that happens, Grendel grabs up Leonard. And then also the bat descends upon the street toughs.
This is such an incredible Batman sequence because I just love Batman being scary. Batman should scare the shit out of people. And so illustration-wise, he looks like a black flower just enveloping the victim, basically. And, Batman talks about these guys are probably on drugs, so that, fear imagery is really going to be effective.
That's right.
So he's really clinical about it, but it's beautiful. It's like Nosferatu. And it's such a, to draw this, you just have to think about the shape. And if you nail that shape, it works. Is you don't need any anatomy here, but it's so scary. And Batman, he's not going to kill this guy. He's drinking his blood. But if you're one of these guys, an onlooker, even Hillie, it's like, what the hell? I love it. It's one of my favorite little Batman sequences in the entire book.
The rhythm of this entire sequence is the Zappa style rhythmic composition of this whole thing. There's so much symmetry. I mean, if you go all the way back to page 10 and 11, and on 11, that sequence where, like, the collage you were talking about, Eli, there's a ton of symmetry with Hillie at the bottom. And, it's just like every position is sort of pre-marked. Yeah. Then there's the one, the four vertical panels on 12, where Hillie and it cross-cuts at the bottom between Hillie and Rachel, but then up top between Grendel and Batman, that second panel of Grendel where it's
almost O.G. Anderson
it's
style.
Leonard's POV.
Yeah,
you can see his tie. He's leaning back. He can see his own necktie on his chest.
Yeah, and
the fork is right in his face, and then the mask is like photographically.
Yeah.
It's so good.
It's Ho.G. Anderson come Tony McMillen in a way.
I would never think of that angle. Like, how do you even? I mean, that's just a wild angle to even visualize for a comic. And just action. I'm not here for either your money or your life. Although I could easily be persuaded concerning the latter.
Look at this: 4 panels on 12, 2 on 13. And then 14 and 15 get this sort of semi-splash treatment.
Beautiful.
It's just like it's like Zappa, baby.
Ah, man, I'm thinking in my head of different Zappa songs that I'm gonna put in. Like, so good. And again, next on the second page, we really see like the action and our first big spreads of these two characters that are leading this book, and Hillie in the foreground and the toughs, and then boy do we get a Dark Knight Returns style lunge at the people here, man. Almost looks like he's coming at Hillie, and Hillie's probably like stunned in the action, and he just swoops past her and does some of that Arkham Asylum game fighting where he's just ripping back and forth to people.
Well, I like the idea of Batman. Obviously, he's not going to hurt anybody he's there to save, but they don't really know that. He's pretty fast and he's very scary. You would be freaked out by this guy, even if you heard stories like, oh, he just helps people. It's like, nah, it's
right, but he helps the victim, but he sure sends some street toughs to the hospital,
right.
I'm sure.
But these are both great pages, but the Hunter pose, and he's done that in a few other stories. Hunter, the fork at somebody in a profile shot, kind of like that. I love it. It's just there's so much character in that. So arrogant and so much flair, and
and I think you can kind of see the difference in their actions and the way they go about doing their things. Again, Batman is big, not clunky, but like a hammer,
right?
And Grendel is lean and elegant and like a sharp knife and. Batman uses blunt objects and things, and Hunter is smooth and uses
super delicate and casual, and the way he draws the figure here is very reminiscent to some of the Devil by the Deed.
Yeah, you always point out how he handles the fork here, and even here he's got he's got the pinky up like a pool cue, or he's like he's not like grasping it tightly white knuckled. He's like got it there.
Yeah.
Well, you understand he fences. It's like he's got that thing
his
about
rapier.
Him. Right.
He's got a rapier, a
He's got the boot between his legs.
Right.
On the chair.
Yeah.
And he's just like he's lithe and pretty androgynous, in his way.
And the way that Matt draws him when he talks, he's throwing his arms up and he's using these lavish hand gestures, and he's like, "Tell me again what you did." He's making these prognostications or whatever.
That's why I'm like, no one can just guess he's Hunter Rose. Like, come on, like,
Yeah, they never can guess that the visiting artist is also the visiting hero / villain.
I mean, the cane, I guess, is everything. Well, he's got a cane, dude. There's no way he's a super secret ninja guy.
Yeah, we've talked about, and they talk about the cane here, and it's like, well, there's a 24-year-old with a cane. It's an old fencing injury, probably, or whatever.
He's like the baritone in an R&B group, and he just does the breakdowns. So the canes, he's got.
So what is Larry's art gallery? What is their connection with the Sphinx? Now they're holding an art opening. They're holding an art show as well. But what is it that really? They're hosting the gala.
Hosting, it's Wayne Tech Money and Leonard's facility, I believe.
Okay, all right. So part of the gallery is they're perhaps even working on some of the restoration that's happening with the Sphinx head.
That's a Janosch.
Janos Boha.
Yeah.
Cool. So now I think you're right. Yeah.
What do you think you think that this is the grandfather clock going off at the bottom of 15? The red bong sound effect? That wasn't.
I think he's like, I need my bong.
Yeah, right.
To put up with this, please.
It's the last time he was at a grand piano, he was playing it.
Love that.
Here's just
Fave
walking
pan
all
right
over
there.
it. Yeah.
You're the entertainment.
Right.
Oh, that was so great, man. I love that. And so he's walking up. I loved this too. That in the way that he's messing with this guy is he's gonna like cut his art up. Like that's what he can use.
Right.
The first thing to get to this guy. I even wrote down he's torturing him by ripping his art, threatening to rip the art, and
this guy. It works. This guy is more concerned about that than his wife, who he's like,
yeah.
It's pretty telling.
That painting is over 300 years old. What do you want? What do you want? And he's like, yeah, that's all he had to do. And Batman's still
rhythm,
down.
Wonderful rhythm on the top tier of the layouts. Where
beautiful.
It's quarter notes and then eighth notes or whatever it is.
I love how you're putting it into musical terms.
No,
Ben.
third.
Really?
It's third notes, 2/6. And I don't play any kind. You guys are both musicians. I don't know anything about that shit.
That's hurtful.
Don't berate musicians by calling us one. I'm just kidding. I don't know Tony's talent. It's probably more than mine.
They're less than you think, probably. But I do also enjoy that the black pages he uses throughout the series, or throughout this miniseries. It's always for good effect. Like these pages are definitely it aids them, and it's fun when you come out of it in a couple pages when it's back to the white border again.
Is it because these are the sequences taking place at night, or these are just the Grendelin deeds?
Yeah, I think it's
the black gutters.
Because like the next, I think when King when she wakes up, it's still probably night, but
right.
It's like the nightmare's over, like you said. Like
yeah. Anyway, Hunter's up to his same old blackmail Polaroids.
He loves
this is
those.
Probably the third or fourth time we've seen this.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like a go-to thing, and it seems a lot too like it's always I guess not always, but a lot of times it's like a man with a wife who has a young man that he nights with.
But this is chronologically the first time Matt's done it.
I think perhaps too in the time that it's written, that could be like the most shocking thing that someone could be doing.
I'm sure Matt Wagner saw Red Shoe Diaries like we all did, and like, oh fuck, man, you could wreck up someone's whole life.
I had interviewed him one time and we were talking about the aerialist, and he said that he simply wanted to write something that was the most far off and crazy thing that he could possibly write. And I think in doing so, that was also its undoing, but he just wanted to write like the most wild thing at the time.
How much aerialist is there? Is there 2 issues or?
I think there's just 2 stories in a Dark Horse
DHP?
Presents. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. I don't think it ever got finished. Yeah.
Real quick on page 17, the bottom of the shoe, that's really well drawn. I love that the patterns on the shoe. It's super simple, but I stuck. I was damn good.
I mean, that's a Chuck too. I mean, they were probably. I think it's clear that Matt Wagner was wearing Chucks back in the day a lot. Judging from
him and Frank Miller, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, I love that, man.
Yeah, the rectangle in the arch is really cool.
There's an artist I like now just because he had a Batman statue and Batman's wearing the Chucks. Oh, what's his name? Anyway, I'll put it down here.
It'll
He
come.
does great stuff. I got him to do a surfer pinup for me where a surfer's wearing
Oh, this
swim
is Surface
trunks
Word?
and chucks. It's great.
Oh,
yeah.
sweet. Okay.
And I like how Batman is like breaking down these people. Like number 2 took some effort, big, thick, slow. Number 3, tobacco breath. 4, tried to run, caught him with my thing, you know. And I love Hunter. He's like Lenny. I couldn't help but think about like how Bill Murray's like Lenny talking to the mayor.
Right. You, the guy who saves New York. I love that Batman has some cash in the utility belt for her cab fare.
Oh, that's what an amazing panel! I've never
Yeah.
seen anything like. I've never seen Batman do that before.
This is pre-Bat card from Batman Forever or whatever.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
And the cabbie's like, hell yeah, dude. Come on. This is great.
Yeah, you got it. And Hillie's like, oh,
Right.
paying for my cab? What? That's
It's so cool
great.
he didn't have enough money. He's like, Batman, thank you, but this is actually not enough. This is not even close to
Yeah.
enough.
I'm sorry, Captain. What does he mean by exact change? I just watched Star Trek 4 the other day.
You did the right thing.
Grendel telling Leonard that his secret boyfriend is very cute is
That's great too.
is wonderful.
Yeah,
Great touch.
Really, really fun.
yeah.
And Grendel lays out that we're gonna, whatever this is, we're gonna pin this on the Riddler. You know, you're gonna tell him that this was the Riddler's doing.
Yeah, he's laying out his plan, you know. I'm giving you this riddle that you're going to give to the cops to say that's who tormented you, and we're going to set up the Riddler immediately. And then on the next page, we see Rachel waking up from a nightmare where
The white gutter is back.
it is. And Hillie is like starstruck. She's looking at the back of the cab as it zooms off, and as Batman, swoops up into the sky with his batarang or with his thing. And then Rachel immediately gets a call from Leonard, who is now frazzled and yet has a mission. And
the directional thing is so cool with him. Like, you know, the panels, he's left, he's right, he just keeps on moving around. It's such a cool little
to show that
trick.
he's perhaps like spinning out.
Right. And it just, especially the upside down eyes, and his eyes are red. It's
Great.
great stuff.
And then the camera is rotating around Rachel slowly. So there's a wonderful contrast between those two motions.
Yeah. And again, like you were talking about, she just talks shit to him. And that's and you know, Grendel was like, tell me about this girl, and he's like, I can't control her, she's uncontrollable, whatever. And he's like, you better, clamp down. And he can't even do it. Probably he's too frazzled, but also Rachel's just like, yo, dude, you quivering macho pile of shit.
Dude, she's so badass. I love it. She wakes up in the middle of the night from a nightmare. It's like, fuck you.
Yeah.
I mean,
she's got that nightmare energy too. She's all pissed off and she's like, scared. And she's like, you real life aren't going to take me, like.
Right.
And then she gets up and she's making tea right as Hillie gets home. And she's like, I got to tell you about everything. It's that whole thing of when your buddy's drunk and you're not, and they're just going off and off and off and off. And you're just kind of like, but I mean, this is a story I'm sure that Rachel's like, holy shit, Batman, what? Foot fight.
Exactly. The next page, she's cool. She's like, that's a pretty good story. Okay, awesome. Yeah.
I guess it shows how good of friends they are too, and how they can kind of bring each other down to the level of calmness after both having these kind of wild nights.
Just another night in Gotham.
Mm-hmm. And I
rhythm,
love,
the rhythm on the layout here is like really just marvelous.
And the fact that last page is just them like taking that breath after they both had this whole thing, and they're chilling out and they're like reflecting. Like that panel speaks loudly, and yet it doesn't need much. I think this is
17-year-olds are loving it.
They're loving it. And then I think perhaps this might be a good place for us to stop, and we can come back next week. We're about 20 pages in. All of the stuff is laid out. You guys feel all right with that?
Yep.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
All right, cool. Tony, thanks for joining us. Next time,
My pleasure.
keep on grilling.